MotorWeek 89, television's automotive magazine, with your host, John Davis.
Hello and welcome again to MotorWeek 89. We're glad to have you with us. A few years ago, some engineers at Mazda took a good hard look at the sports car market. What they found didn't please them. The market was packed with expensive, gimmick-filled vehicles that bore little resemblance to the Lotus Elans and MGBs that purists had been raised on. They set out to change all that. One thing they've done is bring out a sportier base model RX7, the GTU. That was only the beginning. For 1989, there are more back-to-basics Mazda sports cars. Now there's another variation on the RX7. This one's called the GTUS, not to be confused with the base model GTU. And it's an RX7 turbo without a turbo. We don't quite understand why Mazda chose the name GTUS. Turbo Light makes more sense. All the great taste of the turbo with fewer horses. And the GTUS has all the turbo's suspension pieces. Notice the wheels. They're the turbo's 16-inchers. Other RX-7s get 15s. But elsewhere on the outside, the GTUS looks more like a base RX-7. Thankfully, the turbo's ugly hood scoop was not necessary here. And the hood is made of lightweight aluminum. All 5 RX-7 models get a minor facelift for '89. The front end looks more integrated now, and body side molding is color keyed. At the rear, the sharpest eyes will notice slightly restyled tail lamps. For under the hood, Mazda's 13B rotary engine has had a lot of revisions this year. Rotors are 5% lighter, flywheel 16%. The intake system is new, compression has been raised, and the rev limit is now 8,000 RPM. Horsepower rating is 160, torque 142 pound-feet. Maybe best of all, the rotary's oil pump has been revised to reduce excessive oil consumption, something we experienced with our 1986 long-term RX-7 GXL. Inside, in keeping with the GTUS's no-gimmick philosophy, leather upholstery is not available, but there have been revisions. The gauge layout has been altered and the instrument markings changed for better readability. Here's another improvement. The seats have been redesigned for better lateral support. Adjustment is minimal, but no one complained of not finding a comfortable driving position. Motorized shoulder belts are now standard on all RX-7 models. Elsewhere for the driver, controls are as they've always been, logical and innovative. It's no surprise why Ford chose almost identical controls for their Mazda-built Probe. Controls for heating and ventilation are simple and efficient. Not surprisingly, air conditioning is an extra cost option on the GTUS. So is a cassette player. This unpretentious AM/FM stereo is standard. And so are these behind-the-seat storage bins. If you want optional 2+2 seating, you'll have to opt for the more expensive GXL model. A parcel shelf to cover the cargo area is something you give up on this model too. But then sports cars aren't made for hauling things. They're for driving. To do that, we took the RX-7 GTUS to Savannah, Georgia's Roebling Road Raceway. We were both pleased and disappointed with the RX-7's performance. The numbers were good enough, 7.7 seconds from 0 to 60, 15.8 seconds to the end of the quarter mile, ending up at 87 miles per hour. To go with those numbers, the engine just seems a lot more willing to rev than in previous RX-7s. But we were not happy with the shifter. While Mazda says it's been revised this year for smoother, more positive shifting, we found it stiff and sometimes difficult to engage. There's nothing difficult about stopping the GTUS. The brake pedal has a solid feel, and that makes it easy to use all the car's braking potential without causing the brakes to lock. Distances and stops from 60 miles per hour average to 132 feet, a respectable number. The GTUS is not available with anti-lock brakes. They're reserved for the turbo only. But as we've said, the GTUS does have all the suspension goodies from the turbo, and even those have been improved for this year. The front and rear suspensions now have ball joint mountings for the anti-sway bars. That means less suspension noise. This is one of those cars that makes its driver the center of the universe. It does exactly as you command. The front end stays on the course you've chosen for it, with minimal speed-sapping plow. And the rear end stays stuck to the road in all situations short of abysmal driver error. At speed, there's a wispy quality to this car, but still a feeling of stability. If we could change anything, it would be the feel of some controls. The clutch and steering are both very light to the touch, almost to the point of being vague. We might also ask for a little more power, but then there's always the more expensive turbo. As it stands, the GTUS is a good compromise, especially at $19,600. That's over $7,000 less than the turbo. And for those of you who value good sport car handling over turbo power, bells and whistles, the GTUS is a fine addition to the RX7 line. But let's suppose you don't have $20,000 to plunk down for a sports car. Mazda is about to introduce an answer. Called the Mx-5 Miata, this two-seater is the spiritual successor to the British Roadsters of the 60s. With a base price under $14,000, it will be available July 1st. Mazda expects to sell 40,000 of them a year. We had a chance to drive one recently and were impressed with the car's level of sophistication. While open roadsters have traditionally been based on existing components, the Miata is all new. It was designed for one thing and one thing only: having fun. When we get our long-term test Miata, we'll let you know just how much fun and how long it lasts.